Welcome back to Beyond the Headline, everyone. It's a really exciting day to be on the show because I'm here with my friend Nikhil Basu Trivedi, the principal at Shasta Ventures, and we are at Shasta Ventures. Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming by.
I'd love to start out with a quote that you had in one of your recent posts. Like I said, super happy that you've started writing. You shared as a Series A fund, we're always thinking about what's next. Mm-hmm. Where is the puck going to be? So what are you excited about right now? Where's the puck going?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Jenna, for having me back on the show. Really love the videos and the interviews that you've done. We are constantly asking that question of ourselves here at Shasta. And I think all venture capitalists are asking or continue to ask that question of what's next. And I think the answer keeps changing for me and for us because we continue to get inspired by entrepreneurs that we meet with and new companies that we're seeing that are pushing the boundaries of innovation. So, if you had to ask me right now, what are some of those things that I'm thinking about? I think, for example, the automation of transportation and self-driving cars could be the most important technology shift over the next decade or two. It's going to happen. Tesla, for example, has 100,000 Model S's out on the road right now that have autopilot, that are collecting millions of miles of data around autonomous driving every day. And they, Uber, Google, Apple, and the manufacturers themselves all know that this is coming and are all working on, what does that future of autonomous transportation look like? And I think that could change and have effects on almost every industry. And so I think that's one thing that I'm thinking a lot about in terms of what's coming next. And then I think there are other really big categories. I think automation of transportation, that's like trillions of dollars of potential disruption. I think the same is true in health and medicine, where our country spends trillions of dollars in that system every year, and it's so ineffectual for so many people in terms of actually delivering great preventative care and great treatment. And so I think a lot will continue to change there. I really hope it does in the next decade. Another area that I think about is housing and, the way people are living has changed quite a bit. Our generation has now grown up with this concept of Airbnb and the ability to book
co-living,
and now things like co-living. But Airbnb's built I think it's going to be around for a really long time, and maybe $100 billion business around short-term rentals, and change the way people think about owning a place and how they can rent it out, but also, of course, about where they can stay in a city or in a new destination, and how they can experience the world. And I think that could happen in longer-term housing as well. Maybe things like co-living. Could be disruptors in the housing market for monthly rentals, and maybe there's I think there's likely to be disruption in home buying and selling as well. And so, self-driving cars, health and medicine, housing. I think consumer finance. We've seen a number of interesting companies launch recently around insurance. And around lending and around investing. A lot of them leverage mobile as a key enabler. So, long answer to your question, but those are some of the areas that I'm thinking a lot about and that we at Shasta are thinking a lot about.
I always love to get to chat with you about that stuff or read your post because it reminds me, I was going through some notes this morning and I saw one that just stood out and reminded me. It was from Lloyd Tabb in the first round review. And he said when he's interviewing candidates, he'll ask them, what's something that made today really great? And it reminded me of you because on social media, when we're together, when you're writing, it just exudes how much you love your job. What's something today that made it great?
Just today? about this for a second. Apart from getting to see you and share a story of how an entrepreneur that we recently met with actually saw my interview with Jenna, video interview with Jenna, and really enjoyed seeing it, and he ended up choosing to work with us. So that was a really exciting thing to be able to share with you. Other exciting things, I mean, I met with 2 companies this morning, and we're not going to move forward with either, but I get excited, just by seeing the dedication of these people, these entrepreneurs who are dropping everything, sacrificing a lot in their lives and careers to work on something that they believe in and that they believe should exist in the world. And so I get inspiration, still from that. And I think to do venture capital for a while, you kind of have to. At least my perspective is you have to be really excited, even by those conversations that won't end up in you investing in the company.
Do you feel like you have a mantra for your work? Like your purpose as an investor? Yeah,
I think, beneath wanting to be part of some legendary companies and wanting to, have really successful investments, because that's ultimately our mantra in our business. We have to return money to our limited partners. I think, I absolutely gravitate towards founders who are mission driven, who are working on something that they just believe should exist in the world and that serves a higher purpose and benefit to society if it works. And I think the more recent mantra for me, sort of tied to that, is, do I see this thing being, if it works, being absolutely massive? Mm-hmm. Like, there's only one $100 billion company created every 5 years, maybe, or I don't know exactly what the statistic is, but it's something like that. There's maybe like $200 billion companies created every decade. So the goal in our business is to get to be part of one of them. But I do think, as you look at the world moving forward, that the things around self-driving cars, around housing, around finance, some of these areas that I described earlier, there's the potential to have that kind of generational company be created that also does real positive benefit for the world. And if you think about the ones that have been created to date, like Google and Facebook and Amazon and others, they've absolutely been net positive to our lives, in my opinion.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because last time we were together, you exposed me a little bit more to the reality of life at sea. And just like you said at the start of that, you have limited partners that you have to, return their capital. And I think we have a misconception that your life is meeting with entrepreneurs every day. It's so easy, and in a second, you know where you're going to invest. What's the reality like that not many people know about?
Well, the reality is, we absolutely spend time meeting with entrepreneurs. The vast majority of our time gets spent in a couple buckets: finding great companies, making the decision as to whether or not to invest, winning the right to invest, and getting hired by the entrepreneur and kind of convincing the entrepreneur to work with you. And then a big portion of our time is spent with our portfolio companies once we do invest, and trying to be as helpful as we can be, but also being there in the tough times as well as the good ones. And the tough times are often not written about. They're not publicly broadcasted, but they take up a lot of our time as investors, especially when we're on the board or we're the primary lead investor in the company. And so those are some things. We do also raise money. So we raise money from our limited partners, and that's something that I guess is not super transparent to entrepreneurs or talked about, but it does take work to raise a new fund for most firms. And so that's something that most VCs also spend time on that isn't widely discussed.
There's 2 things you brought up there that I really want to dive in. The first is being on a board. Mm-hmm. What is it like to be on a board? Because I think sometimes it's a little bit of a black box where you think you just meet and do meetings. and everyone kind of sticks together. What's it like? What's your role?
Yeah, so at Shasta we view the our role as a board member to be the first call for an entrepreneur, to be a thought partner that asks the right questions and helps get the entrepreneurs to the right answers versus just delivering the answers to the entrepreneurs that we work with. Because ultimately, another view we have as it relates to the board and our being a board member is that the entrepreneur is the one who's building the company, building the team, building the product, raising money. In almost every case, especially at the beginning, the founder is also the CEO. And so they're the ones in charge, and our roles as board members is to be as supportive as we can be of the entrepreneur. The other thing I'll say is that I think there's this sort of mystique around the board meeting and being on the board, and the reality is that most of the really important work that happens as it relates to helping our companies doesn't happen within the board meeting itself. The board meeting is typically where the board members have read the latest update about the business, and we love entrepreneurs that kind of give the board in the board meeting the quick update on the business and then dive in on maybe 3 key areas or questions that she or he is focusing on as it relates to building the business that they like our perspective as a board to get to the right decision again. And so that's typically what happens in a board meeting, but the nitty gritty and a lot of the real work happens in the calls and emails and day-to-day stuff outside of that.
I'm really glad you brought that up because it kind of goes back to the role that founders play. So, they're focusing on the initiatives, they're informing you guys, they're leading their team, and they're hiring. And everyone says, we like to back incredible founders.
Yeah.
And I kept hearing that, and so I finally wanted to know, okay, well, what does that mean? Because everyone was giving me the same traits. And I want to ask you, Nikhil, on the other end of things, what are some non-traditional characteristics you've seen in the founders that you work with that help them operate at this incredible potential?
Yeah. One thing that, I think everything I'll say here might be more traditional than non-traditional because I feel like a lot has been written and talked about as it relates to the ideal makeup of a founder or what an investor looks for in a founder who's going to build a really, really big business. For me, some traits that I've started to better understand as I've spent more time in the venture business are traits like the ability to prioritize, like being ruthless at prioritizing what matters and what doesn't matter is a super important trait of a founder.
It's hard.
And it's really hard because there's so many distractions and there's, often that it's not clear what you should be prioritizing, but the best founders just have that gut instinct around what they need to be doing, what's of the most critical importance, and it kind of relates to a second point, which is operating with speed to knock those priorities off the to-do list, so to speak, as quickly as possible. I found that the founders increasingly that I'm inspired by are the ones that are just able to move so quickly. It's kind of unbelievable how quickly they're able to ship the next version of the product out there, learn and improve themselves to get the next one out there even faster, and to hire the best people. It kind of manifests itself across the product and the team and customer acquisition and all the different aspects of ultimately building a really big business. And then you look at like the really great ones. Even people like Jeff Bezos, who I think I was who was it? I was listening to a podcast the other day. I think it was a Recode podcast with Kara Swisher, where the guest said that Jeff Bezos is the only entrepreneur that has built $200 billion businesses because of Amazon Retail and AWS. No one else has done that. and like the Amazon philosophy of constant experimentation with all these little products, but then knowing when to prioritize one that works in the case of AWS or Kindle or maybe now Amazon Echo, that is super impressive to see, an entrepreneur like Jeff Bezos be able to do that even at massive scale.
Yeah, massive. Like I'm glad that came in, because that word massive always sticks with me. And I've talked to entrepreneurs where they say, okay, so we're 50 people, we're 100 people, we're 200 people. And then you start scaling, and it's a different game.
Yeah.
And there's a huge learning curve for everyone involved, but particularly the founder. How do I still be a leader, but, meet everyone on my team?
Yeah.
What have you seen founders do to build sustainable companies, to build sustainable cultures?
Yeah. One of the things we encourage our founders to do at Shasta, the founders that we work with, is to set cultural values at an early stage, and to recognize that those cultural values, while they will impact decision making and hiring and the product, once they're set, those cultural values do change as you grow as well. And so that's one of the things that I've seen be effective as companies scale.
Can you give us an example of maybe one of your companies or a company you admire who's done that?
Well, I think if you look at Facebook, today their mission, their cultural value is to help the world be more open and connected. I think that's how they describe it. But that wasn't the mission. That wasn't what was driving the culture from day one. Obviously it started off as a social network on Harvard's campus and then to other universities. But then there's other things. So that's like the big picture mission, which constantly gets, if you're successful, that mission, the bar just keeps getting higher, and you keep aiming for something even higher. But then there's all these little things like move fast and break things, which is a Facebook cultural value that I think they've tried, and that's what's hard. They've tried to have that be part of Facebook for a long time now. I guess I was just talking about Amazon, and they have a bunch of different cultural values that enable them to do all these experiments and then know when to double down on experiments that are really working well.
It's a prioritization.
And yeah, it kind of all comes back, I think, to prioritization, speed, sort of paranoia, and knowing that if you don't iterate and innovate, even after finding product market fit, you could be disrupted by the next great product that comes along. I think it's a combination of those things that makes up the great founders and the great businesses.
I love that, and I love the way that you were able to bring them together. And it leads me to where I want to close. When you think back, Gil, on the last 4 years at Shasta, is it 4 years
3.5
now? Almost.
years.
So
Yeah.
almost 4 years.
Yeah.
Investors talk about pattern recognition and growth, and that you really have to just, you learn by doing.
Yeah.
When you think of just this year in particular, the last almost May, what's your core learning? What are you so excited about?
I think my core learning has been that I need to keep setting the bar higher myself. Just as an entrepreneur, founder, as they get more and more successful, need to raise the bar higher. We or me as a young person growing in the venture capital industry needs to continue to set the bar higher in terms of the types of founders that I and we want to work with, and the potential of the ideas that they're working on. So that's one of the things I've been really challenging myself to do, and it means in many cases turning down companies that are doing well, that are doing really well.
You taught me that.
But where your instinct tells you that for one reason or another, it's going to be $100 million outcome instead of, or maybe a multi-$100 million outcome instead of a potential multi-billion dollar outcome. And so that's one of the things that I've been trying to push myself towards. And the other thing is just continuing to learn from the past and from pattern recognition around what makes up the types of founders that I want to work with and those types of ideas, and getting to conviction quickly when I see something that just blows me away. And also not spending time with companies where I know for one reason or another we won't ultimately get there. When I say not spending time, just being really efficient with my time when I don't feel like it's a fit. So those are some of the things I've been working on. But really I'm working on there's lots for me to work on to keep getting better.
I think again, you knock it out of the park with that prioritization. What are the things that I need to be doing right now? They're going to get me and my team where I need to go. One of the things you're doing is writing, and so I'd love to close with everyone knowing how they can stay up to date with you, how they can stay up to date with Shasta, and just kind of get insight to what you guys are working on.
Sure. On Twitter, I am at NBT. Same thing on Medium, where I publish all the posts that I'm working on, and on LinkedIn, Nikhil BT, I think is my username on LinkedIn. So those are the three areas that are really easy to access me on and see all the work that I'm trying to put out there. Always love people's feedback and responses to the writing. And then we're at ShastaVentures.com as well, and it's a great group of folks, and we all have our own Twitter handles and blogging platforms of choice.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to see you again.